Right in the middle of my ex-husband's wedding, to the woman who used to be my foster sister, my son grabbed the microphone, looked him straight in the eye, and said, "Don't call me son. You lost that right when you used lies to destroy my mother." My name is Charlotte King. I was once Austin's rising star chef until I lost everything to the wrong man. They called me a failure. They called my son illegitimate. But what they never expected was that we would rise from the very place they tried to bury us. And when Elliot played that video, right there at the wedding, exposing their entire twisted scheme in front of hundreds of wealthy guests, the room went silent. An entire empire collapsed, all because one boy had the courage to stand up for his mother. Before I share this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you've ever been knocked down and got back up, hit the like button and subscribe. Trust me, you'll want to hear what happened next. The cream-colored envelope felt heavier than it should have when I pulled it from our rusted mailbox. My name, Charlotte King, was written in that pretentious calligraphy I'd grown to hate during my marriage. Even before opening it, I knew who it was from. "Mom, is that from Dad?" Elliot asked from the kitchen table, his algebra homework spread before him like a battlefield he was losing. I wanted to lie. God, how I wanted to protect my 14-year-old son from whatever fresh hell Brandon had planned for us. But I'd promised myself 6 years ago, when I'd packed our lives into 3 suitcases and left that mansion in River Oaks, that I'd never lie to my boy again. "Looks like it," I said, sliding my finger under the seal. The invitation was exactly what I'd expect from Brandon Wyatt and his new fiancée, my former foster sister, Felicity. Gold embossing, tissue paper inserts, and enough ostentation to fund our grocery bill for 3 months. But it was the handwritten note that made my hands shake. "Charlotte, we'd love for you and Elliot to join us in celebrating our union. Brandon has something important to discuss with Elliot regarding his education. Please come. Felicity." I crumpled the note before Elliot could see it, but not before he'd read the invitation itself. His face, so much like his father's it sometimes hurt to look at him, lit up with something I hadn't seen in years: hope. "Dad wants to talk about my education?" he asked, trying to sound casual but failing miserably. "Maybe he's finally going to help with that boarding school scholarship?" The scholarship? Of course. Brandon had dangled that carrot for 2 years now, always with conditions, always with strings that required me to grovel or sign something away. St. Catherine's Academy had already accepted Elliot based on his grades, but without financial aid, it might as well have been on Mars. I looked around our cramped apartment, really just a converted garage behind my friend Maria's house, and made a decision I'd regret 1,000 times over the next 3 weeks. "We'll go," I heard myself say. Elliot hugged me so hard I thought my ribs might crack. He hadn't hugged me like that since he was 8, back when he still believed his father might come home for his birthday. I held him tight, breathing in the scent of his cheap shampoo and the determination that kept him at the top of his class despite everything. That night, I stood in front of my closet, if you could call a curtained rod in the corner a closet, and faced the truth. I owned exactly 1 dress appropriate for a society wedding, and I'd bought it at Goodwill for a job interview I didn't get. The navy blue fabric was decent quality, probably donated by someone who'd tired of it after a season. Someone like Felicity. My hands were different now than when I'd been head chef at the Fairmont. These days, they smelled of buttercream and food coloring from my part-time job at Rosie's Bakery, not the exotic spices and expensive wines I'd once commanded in a 5-star kitchen. The calluses were the same, but everything else had changed. I'd been good at my job. Damn good. Food and Wine had called me Austin's rising culinary star just months before my world imploded. But that was before I'd walked in on Brandon and Felicity in what was supposed to be our bed, in what was supposed to be our forever home. "You're nothing without me," he'd said during the divorce proceedings, his family's lawyers making sure I left with less than nothing. A washed-up cook with a bastard son. Elliot wasn't a bastard. We'd been married when he was born. But Brandon had found a way to make even that sound dirty. The way he'd made everything about us sound like something to be ashamed of. The dress would have to do. I'd wear my hair up, the way I used to when I worked the line. And maybe people would be too focused on the bride to notice the former wife who'd been downgraded to cautionary tale. I was wrong about that. I was wrong about so many things. But that night, listening to Elliot practice his speech about why he deserved a chance at St. Catherine's, I told myself I could endure 3 hours of humiliation if it meant my son got his shot at a better life. I just didn't know they'd make sure those 3 hours would feel like 3 lifetimes. 3 weeks later, I stood outside the Fairmont Hotel, my borrowed heels already cutting into my feet. Maria had loaned them to me, along with a clutch that didn't quite match my dress. "You hold your head high, mija," she'd said, pressing a lipstick into my hand. "Show them what they lost." But standing there, watching valets park cars worth more than I'd make in 5 years, I felt exactly like what I was, an interloper in a world that had spit me out and moved on. "You okay, Mom?" Elliot straightened his tie, a birthday gift from last year that he'd barely worn. He looked so grown up, so hopeful. When had my baby become this young man who stood taller than me? "I'm fine," I lied, smoothing an imaginary wrinkle from my dress. "Remember what we talked about? Be polite, say thank you." "And don't expect anything," he finished, but I heard the hurt in his voice. "I know, Mom. But what if Dad really means it this time?" I wanted to tell him that Brandon never meant anything that didn't benefit Brandon. That promises from his father were like smoke, visible for a moment before dissipating into nothing. But hope is cruel that way. It makes you forget the 100 times you've been burned, focusing instead on the possibility that this time might be different. The lobby hadn't changed. Same marble floors I'd once rushed across in chef's whites, late for another 16-hour shift. Same crystal chandeliers that had witnessed my promotion to executive chef at 29, youngest in the hotel's history. Same concierge desk where Philippe still worked, though he pretended not to see me now. The ballroom entrance was flanked by enormous floral arrangements, white orchids and roses that probably cost more than our rent. A table held place cards in the same pretentious calligraphy as our invitation. I found our names quickly, tucked into a corner table so far from the main event, we might as well have been in the parking lot. But it was what was written under our names that made my stomach drop. Charlotte King, former chef, single mother, Elliot King, illegitimate child. "Mom?" Elliot's voice cracked. He'd seen it too. My hands shook as I set the cards back down. Around us, other guests were finding their seats, laughing and chatting about their summer homes and recent vacations. Normal people living normal, wealthy lives, not people who'd been invited as entertainment. "We're leaving," I said, grabbing Elliot's hand. "No." He pulled away, and for a moment I saw his father's stubbornness in the set of his jaw. "If we leave now, they win. They get to tell everyone we couldn't handle it, that we're exactly what those cards say we are." "Elliot, I'm not illegitimate," he said, louder than necessary. A few heads turned. "You and Dad were married. I have the birth certificate to prove it. And you're not just a single mother, you're the best chef in Austin who gave it up to raise me right." My son. My beautiful, brave, too smart for his own good son. I wanted to wrap him in my arms and run. Instead, I straightened my spine the way I used to when facing down a restaurant critic or a kitchen disaster. "Okay," I said. "We stay, but the minute you want to leave, I won't." He offered me his arm like a proper gentleman. "Let's show them what the kings are made of." We found our table, number 27, practically in the service corridor. Our table mates included what appeared to be Brandon's dental hygienist, someone's +1 who kept checking their phone, and an elderly couple who seemed to have wandered into the wrong wedding entirely. The centerpiece was noticeably smaller than those on the other tables. Even the linens seemed like afterthoughts, slightly off-white compared to the pristine ivory everywhere else. They'd thought of everything in their campaign to humiliate us. But I hadn't survived 6 years of single motherhood, of clawing our way back from nothing, to crumble now. I sat with the same posture I'd learned at culinary school when they'd told us that presence was half of being a chef. Elliot followed my lead, and for a moment I was proud enough to almost forget why we were there. Then the music started. Those first notes of the wedding march that sound like doom to anyone who's been divorced. And I realized the real show was about to begin. Felicity glided down the aisle in a dress that could have funded Elliot's entire education, her smile as perfect and false as the extensions in her hair. But it was Brandon, waiting at the altar, who made my chest tight. He looked exactly the same. Golden, confident, untouched by the lives he'd destroyed. He saw us. I know he did. His eyes found ours across the ballroom, and his smile widened. The trap was set. We'd walked right into it. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I wondered what more they could possibly take from us that they hadn't already stolen. The reception began with champagne I couldn't afford to drink and appetizers that reminded me of everything I'd lost. Each perfectly plated canapé that passed our table was like a small knife, reminding me of the kitchen I'd once run, the team I'd once led, the dreams I'd once plated with the same precision. Ladies and gentlemen, Felicity's voice rang out over the microphone, honeyed and false. Brandon and I want to thank you all for joining us on this perfect day. She stood at the head table like a queen surveying her subjects, her gown catching the light in ways that made her look almost ethereal. The foster child who'd come to live with us when she was 16, who I'd taught to make hollandaise and proper knife cuts, who'd cried on my shoulder about boys and homework and feeling like she didn't belong. We especially want to thank those who've traveled far to be here, she continued, her eyes finding mine with surgical precision. And those who've fallen far. It reminds us all how blessed we are. Laughter rippled through the room. Polite, knowing laughter. The kind that comes when everyone's in on the joke except the punchline herself. Beside me, Elliot's hands clenched into fists under the table. Don't, I whispered, placing my hand over his. This is what they want. But Felicity wasn't done. You know, Brandon and I believe in charity, in giving back. That's why we've made sure everyone could be here today, regardless of their current circumstances. More laughter. Someone at the next table whispered something about Brandon's ex, and can you believe she actually came? My face burned, but I kept my expression neutral. I'd learned to do that during the divorce proceedings, when Brandon's mother had called me a gold digger, despite the fact that I'd been earning more than her son when we met. The salad course arrived. Microgreens I recognized from the supplier I'd once used, dressed in a vinaigrette I'd taught the Fairmont kitchen staff to make. Even the plating was familiar. They were serving my recipes at my ex-husband's wedding. That's your pear and gorgonzola, Elliot said quietly. He remembered. Of course he did. He'd spent enough evenings doing homework at the kitchen counter while I tested new dishes. Before I could respond, a shadow fell over our table. Margot Wyatt stood there in all her glory. Brandon's mother, real estate mogul, and the woman who'd made sure I left the marriage with nothing but debt and shame. Charlotte, she said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. How thoughtful of you to come. Though I do hope you didn't have to close your little... What is it you do now? Birthday cakes? Custom cakes and pastries, I replied evenly. At Rosie's Bakery. How quaint. Her smile was sharp as the knives I once wielded. You know, we're actually short-staffed in the kitchen tonight. Some of the servers called in sick. I don't suppose you'd mind helping out. For old time's sake, I'm sure they'd pay you. The tables around us had gone quiet, everyone pretending not to watch while hanging on every word. This was dinner theater, and I was the show. I'm here as a guest, I said. Of course you are. Margot's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. Though one does wonder how you afforded the gift. Or did you forget that too, along with your dignity? Mother, Brandon appeared beside her, his hand on her elbow, but he was smiling too, enjoying the show. Let's not make Charlotte uncomfortable. She's doing the best she can with what she has. We should admire that kind of perseverance. He said perseverance the way someone might say cockroach. Persistent, unwanted, impossible to kill completely. That's when I noticed the woman at the bar. The bartender with striking red hair who'd been watching our table all evening. She caught my eye and did something strange. She winked. Then she moved down the bar toward where Elliot had gone to get a soda, away from the humiliation. We should really return to our seats, Brandon said, guiding his mother away. The main course is about to be served. Charlotte, I do hope you enjoy the meal. The new executive chef used your old menu as inspiration. They glided away, leaving me sitting there with the ruins of my dignity and a salad I'd created in happier times. Around us, conversations resumed with the kind of forced normalcy that follows public executions. But something else was happening at the bar. The red-headed bartender was talking to Elliot, sliding something across the bar that he quickly pocketed. A napkin? A note? He returned to our table looking different somehow. Determined. "What was that about?" I asked. "Nothing," he said, but his eyes were bright with something I couldn't name. "Just getting a Coke." The main course arrived. My signature beef Wellington. The dish that had earned the Fairmont its 5th star. They'd even used my plating style right down to the microgreen garnish I'd pioneered. I couldn't eat it. Every bite would have tasted like betrayal. That's when Margot stood up to give her toast, champagne glass catching the light like a weapon. And I knew, with the instinct that had once made me a great chef, that the worst was yet to come. Margot's speech started the way these things always do, with lies dressed up as memories and insults disguised as compliments. She talked about Brandon's journey, his success, his bright future with someone who truly deserves him. "Marriage," she said, pausing for effect, "is about choosing the right partner, someone who elevates you, not holds you back." I felt every eye in the room slide toward our corner table. Even the elderly couple had figured out who I was by now. The ex-wife, the cautionary tale, the woman who'd thought she could marry up and learned otherwise. "Some people," Margot continued, "are meant to serve. Others are meant to be served. It's not cruel. It's simply the natural order of things. Knowing your place is a gift." Beside me, Elliot had gone very still, the kind of still that preceded storms. When Brandon told me he was marrying Felicity, I knew he'd finally found his equal. Someone who understands that the Wyatt name means something. Someone who won't embarrass us by playing dress-up in a kitchen, pretending to be more than she is. The microphone screeched as someone else grabbed it. For a horrified moment, I thought it was Brandon, ready to pile on. But it was Elliot. My 14-year-old son had crossed the ballroom and taken the microphone from Margot's surprised hands. "Hi," he said, his voice cracking but determined. "I'm Elliot King. Some of you know me as Brandon Wyatt's son, though he'd prefer you didn't." The room went silent. Even the service staff froze mid-pour. "I wanted to thank my grandmother for that speech about knowing your place." He emphasized grandmother with teenage sarcasm. "It reminded me of something I recently learned about places and natural order." He pulled something from his pocket, a USB drive. "See, there's this funny thing about security cameras in hotels. They record everything, and bartenders, they hear everything too, especially when people get drunk and chatty at the bar the night before their wedding." "Elliot," Brandon stood up, his face flushing. "Son, don't call me son." Elliot's voice was stronger now. "You lost that right when you made Mom sign away her career for a divorce settlement you never paid. When you promised me educational support you never intended to give. When you invited us here to humiliate us." He plugged the USB into the laptop connected to the projection system, the same one that had been showing beautiful photos of the happy couple. The bartender, I realized. She'd helped him set this up. "But here's the thing about natural order," Elliot continued as the screen flickered to life. "Sometimes it gets disrupted." The audio was crystal clear. Margot's voice filled the ballroom. "The little bitch actually thinks we'll pay for the boys' school. Can you believe it?" Then Felicity. "She'll come. She's desperate. And when she does, we'll make sure everyone sees what happens to women who don't know their place." Brandon's voice. "The custody modification papers are ready. She signs them tomorrow, or we release the photos from the security footage, edited just enough to make it look like she was stealing from the hotel." "That's enough." Brandon lunged for the laptop, but James Calderon, his best man and business partner, stopped him. "No," James said slowly. "I think we should hear this." The recording continued. They'd planned everything. The table placement, the name cards, even having the kitchen serve my recipes. But it was the next part that changed everything. Margot's voice again. "Once she signs over custody, we can finally clean up this mess. The boy goes to military school, the kind that breaks them down properly. And Charlotte, well, who cares what happens to her? You promised me St. Catherine's. Elliot said into the microphone, his voice breaking. "You promised Mom you'd take care of me, but you were just going to ship me off and destroy her." The projection showed documents, emails between Brandon and his lawyers, bank statements showing hidden assets, even a contract with a PR firm to manage the narrative of acquiring full custody. "This is illegal," Brandon shouted. "You can't—" "Actually," a man stood up from table 3, "I'm Charles Morrison, chairman of St. Catherine's board. This is exactly the kind of moral courage we look for in our students. Young man, see me after this event." "I'm done," James Calderon announced, standing. "The Wyatt Foundation can find another investor. I don't do business with people who treat family like this." Felicity fainted, or pretended to. It was hard to tell with her. Brandon caught her, but he was looking at me with something I'd never seen before: fear. The dominoes fell quickly after that. Guests began leaving, murmuring excuses. Business associates distanced themselves. The perfect wedding became a perfect disaster. But I wasn't watching them anymore. I was watching my son walk back to me through the chaos, head high, shoulders straight. The bartender caught my eye again and raised her glass in a silent toast. "Ready to go home?" Elliot asked when he reached me. I stood, steadier than I'd been in years. "Yeah, baby. Let's go home." We left them there in their ruined party, with their ruined plans and their ruined reputations. The boy they'd called illegitimate had just taught them about legitimacy. The woman they'd tried to diminish had raised a son who wouldn't let them. Sometimes the natural order does get disrupted. Sometimes it needs to be. The video went viral before we even made it home. Teen Son exposes elite family's cruel plot at their own wedding had 3 million views by morning. My phone, usually silent except for shift reminders from Rosie's, wouldn't stop buzzing. Reporters, producers, and people I hadn't heard from in years suddenly wanted to know my story. "Mom, you should see this," Elliot said, showing me his laptop. Comments poured in from around the world. Single mothers sharing their struggles. Children of divorce relating to his pain. People who'd been bulldozed by wealthy families finding hope in our story. But it was the email that arrived at 6 a.m. that changed everything. "Ms. King, my name is Harper Montgomery. I was the bartender last night. We need to talk. There are things about the Wyatt family you don't know. Things that could help you. P.S. Your son has more courage than most adults I know." "You think it's legit?" Elliot asked, reading over my shoulder. Before I could answer, my phone rang. Charles Morrison from St. Catherine's. "Miss King, I meant what I said last night. We want Elliot at St. Catherine's. Full scholarship, including room and board. A young man who stands up for his mother like that? That's character money can't buy." I cried. Right there in our tiny kitchen, still wearing my dress from the night before, I sobbed. Elliot held me, and for the first time in 6 years, they weren't tears of desperation. By noon, 3 things had happened that would reshape our lives. First, a morning show called offering me a segment on resilience after divorce. "Your story is inspiring," the producer said. "Single mothers need to hear this." Second, James Calderon's office contacted me. He was starting a new foundation, one that supported single parents pursuing their dreams. "Would you consider being our first recipient? I hear you were quite the chef." Third, Harper Montgomery knocked on our door. She was younger than I'd realized, maybe late 20s, with the kind of sharp intelligence that reminded me of someone. It wasn't until she sat at our scarred kitchen table that I realized who. "Margot's your mother," I said. It wasn't a question. "Birth mother," Harper corrected. "She gave me up when I was 2 days old. Bad for the image, having a baby at 17. Worse when the father was her parents' gardener." Elliot's eyes widened. "You're Brandon's sister?" "Half-sister, though he doesn't know I exist. Margot paid my adoptive parents well to disappear." She smiled bitterly. "But bartenders are invisible to people like them. I've been working at the Fairmont for 3 years, waiting for the right moment." "Why help us?" I asked. "Because you were kind to me once." At my confusion, she continued. 7 years ago, I came to the hotel restaurant. Recent college grad, celebrating my first job. I was dining alone, clearly out of my element. You were the chef then. You came out personally to check on me, made sure I felt welcome. You didn't have to do that." I remembered her now, the young woman who'd seemed so lost eating alone on what should have been a celebration. I'd sent out a special dessert written "Congratulations" in chocolate sauce. "You inspired me," Harper said. "I went into hospitality because of that night. I wanted to make people feel the way you made me feel. Seen, valued, worthy of kindness." "So, last night?" "I knew they were planning something. I'd heard them at the bar. But when I saw your son..." She looked at Elliot with something like admiration. "I knew he was the key. Adults can be dismissed, but a child defending his mother? That's powerful." "Sir," she pulled out a folder. "I've been documenting everything for years, their finances, their schemes, their victims, because you weren't the first, Charlotte. Just the first to survive with your soul intact." The papers told a story of systematic cruelty. Women Brandon had dated and discarded, small business owners Margot had crushed, lives ruined for sport or profit, or simply because they could. "What do you want to do with this?" I asked. "Nothing," Harper said. "It's yours now. Do whatever you think is right. I just wanted them exposed, and Elliot accomplished that beautifully." She stood to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Charlotte? I own a small cafe in South Congress. Nothing fancy, but we need an experienced chef. Interested?" A job. A real culinary job. Not charity or pity, but someone who'd watched me work and wanted what I could offer. "Can I think about it?" "Of course, but don't think too long. Opportunities like last night don't come often. When the universe offers you a redemption arc, you take it." After she left, Elliot and I sat in comfortable silence. Outside, Austin was waking up to a new day. Inside our tiny apartment, everything had changed. "We're going to be okay, aren't we?" Elliot asked. For the first time in 6 years, I knew the answer with certainty. "Yeah, baby, we're going to be more than okay." The morning show appearance changed everything. I sat across from Amanda Chen, America's most trusted morning host, wearing a simple black dress Maria had rushed out to buy me. No borrowed shoes this time. The show had sent a car and a stylist. "Charlotte," Amanda said, leaning forward with that mix of warmth and intensity that had made her famous. "Your son's actions have resonated with millions. But I want to talk about you. 6 years ago, you were Austin's most celebrated young chef. What happened?" I'd practiced this answer, but sitting under the lights with America watching, the words came from somewhere deeper. "I fell in love with the wrong person," I said simply. "And when you have a child, their needs come first, so I made choices. Hard choices. I don't regret protecting my son, but I regret letting them make me believe I was worthless." "The recording revealed they were planning to falsify evidence against you. Have you pursued legal action?" "My focus is on moving forward, not looking back. Elliot starts at St. Catherine's next month. I start at a new restaurant next week. The best revenge is a life well lived." Amanda smiled. "Speaking of that new restaurant, we have a surprise for you." The screen behind us lit up with a familiar face. Gordon Ramsay, video calling from London. "Charlotte King," he said in that distinctive accent. "I ate at the Fairmont 7 years ago. Your beef Wellington was perfection. When I heard what happened, I was furious. Talent like yours doesn't disappear. It waits." I couldn't speak. Gordon Ramsay knew who I was? "I'm opening a new concept in Austin next year," he continued. "I need a head chef who understands Texas flavors but can execute classical technique. Interested?" The audience gasped. Amanda grabbed my hand. Somewhere in the green room, I knew Elliot was probably screaming. Yes, of course, yes." "Brilliant. My team will call. And Charlotte? That ex-husband of yours wouldn't last 5 minutes in a real kitchen. Soft hands and softer spine. You're well rid of him." The interview went viral, too. Had Charlotte Rising trended for 3 days. Job offers poured in, but I'd already committed to Harper's Cafe. When I told her about Gordon's offer, she laughed. "Take it," she said. "I'll be your first investor when you're ready to open your own place." But the sweetest moment came a week later, when Brandon appeared at Rosie's Bakery. I was finishing a 3-tier anniversary cake, lost in the meditation of piping buttercream roses. "Charlotte," I didn't look up. "We have nothing to discuss without lawyers present. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to..." He paused, and I finally met his eyes. He looked tired, older, His wedding ring was already gone. Felicity left, filed for divorce this morning. Turns out she was only interested in the Wyatt money, and now that investors are pulling out. I said nothing, focusing on my roses. Each petal perfect, built layer by careful layer. My mother's lost 3 major deals. The foundation is under investigation. James is suing for breach of fiduciary duty. He laughed bitterly. You won? No, I said, setting down my piping bag. Elliot won. He stood up for truth when you trafficked in lies. He showed courage when you showed cruelty. I didn't raise him to destroy you, I raised him to be better than you. I want to make things right. Then start by paying 6 years of back child support. The court orders are still valid. He pulled out a checkbook. Of course he still used checks. And wrote a number that would have changed my life even 6 months ago. Now it just felt like justice. This doesn't fix everything, I said, taking the check. I know, but maybe it's a start? He looked around the bakery, at my workspace, at the life I'd built without him. You're happy here? I was happy at the Fairmont too. The difference is now I know my worth doesn't depend on anyone else's validation. He left without another word. I watched him go, then returned to my roses. The cake was due in an hour and I had standards to maintain. That night, Elliot and I celebrated with takeout from our favorite food truck. He showed me his St. Catherine's course catalog, eyes bright with possibility. I told him about the Gordon Ramsay opportunity, watching his face light up. We did it, Mom, he said. We actually did it. No, baby, I corrected, pulling him close. We survived it. Now we get to do the good part. We get to live. 6 months later, I stood in my whites again. This time in Gordon Ramsay's Austin kitchen, training the team I'd personally selected. My hands remembered every motion, every technique, as if the 6-year break had been a long breath between services. Chef King, Gordon called from the pass. Taste this. I tried the sauce one of my line cooks had prepared. Close, but not perfect. I adjusted the seasoning, added a splash of wine, whisked it to the right consistency. That's why you're running this kitchen, Gordon said, loud enough for everyone to hear. 6 years away and still better than most who never left. Class is permanent. My phone buzzed. A photo from Elliot at St. Catherine's. He was in his debate team uniform, holding a trophy. First place, Mom. Topic: standing up for truth in an age of power. He and I smiled, remembering the terrified boy who'd grabbed that microphone at the wedding. Now he was captain of the debate team, honor student, and had friends who valued him for his character, not his last name. Chef, Harper appeared in the kitchen doorway. You have a visitor. I expected another reporter. They still called occasionally, wanting updates on the wedding scandal that exposed Austin's elite. Instead, I found Margot Wyatt in my office, looking like a woman who'd lost everything, because she had. I won't stay long, she said, not meeting my eyes. I came to give you this. She handed me an envelope. Inside was a letter. Handwritten, which must have killed her. Read it later, she said. It's an apology. And a confession. My lawyers say I shouldn't put anything in writing, but I'm tired of lawyers. Tired of fighting. Tired of being the person who could plan what we did to you. I studied her. This woman who'd tried to destroy me, who'd called my son illegitimate, who'd treated cruelty like a sport. She looked smaller now, diminished by her own choices. Why? I asked. Why did you hate me so much? She laughed, bitter and broken. Because you reminded me of her, Harper's birth mother, young, talented, unimpressed by money. Brandon's father left me for a chef once, before Brandon was born. I spent 30 years making sure no one from that world could hurt me again. So you hurt us first. I hurt everyone first. It's cost me everything. My business, my reputation, my son's respect. Even Felicity. She's writing a tell-all book, surviving the Wyatts. She stood to go, then paused. For what it's worth, you were a wonderful mother-in-law. And Charlotte? Elliot is extraordinary. You did that. Despite us. Because of us. In spite of us, you raised a good man. She left before I could respond. I put the letter in my desk drawer, unopened. Some apologies are for the person giving them, not the one receiving them. That night was the restaurant's soft opening. Critics, food bloggers, and Austin's culinary elite filled the dining room. In the kitchen, I felt the familiar rush. the controlled chaos, the dance of timing and technique, the alchemy of turning raw ingredients into art. Behind you, chef. 2 beef, 1 salmon, all day? Yes, chef. The music of a working kitchen, and I was the conductor again. Halfway through service, I saw them, Elliot and Harper at table 7, raising their glasses in a toast. My son, my friend, my found family. They'd reserved the table with the best view of the kitchen, where they could watch me work. The reviews would be stellar. The restaurant would be booked solid for months. Gordon would offer me partnerships, opportunities, a future I couldn't have imagined while frosting birthday cakes in a strip mall bakery. But that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the text from Elliot that arrived after service. Watching you tonight was like seeing Superman remember he can fly. Love you, Mom. What mattered was Harper hiring 2 single mothers for her cafe, inspired by our story. What mattered was the scholarship fund James Calderone created in Elliot's name, for children of single parents pursuing their dreams. What mattered was that I'd taught my son to stand up for truth, and he'd taught me to stand up for myself. The letter from Margot remained unopened in my drawer. Some stories don't need epilogues, some endings are better left unwritten. But our story was just beginning. I untied my apron after the last plate went out, my body tired, but my spirit soaring. Tomorrow there would be new challenges, new dishes to create, new dreams to chase. But tonight, I was exactly where I belonged, in a kitchen doing what I loved, surrounded by people who saw my worth. Charlotte King, executive chef. It had a nice ring to it. 1 year later, I stood at the podium of the Austin Convention Center, looking out at 300 faces. The Women in Culinary Leadership Conference had invited me as their keynote speaker. Behind me, a screen showed 2 photos: Charlotte King, disheveled single mother at her ex-husband's wedding, and Charlotte King, James Beard Award nominee for Best Chef Southwest. Rock bottom, I began. Tastes like eating your own recipes at your ex-husband's wedding while his family calls you a failure. Nervous laughter rippled through the audience. But here's what they don't tell you about rock bottom. It's solid. You can build on it. You can push off from it. And when you rise with the strength of someone who knows they can survive anything. I told them about the wedding, about Elliot's courage, about Harper's kindness, about Gordon Ramsay taking a chance on a chef who'd been decorating birthday cakes, about learning that success isn't about proving wrong the people who hurt you. It's about proving right the people who believe in you. 6 months ago, I continued, a young woman came to my kitchen, 16, pregnant, kicked out by her family. She'd heard my story and thought maybe I could help. Today she's my prep cook, studying for her GED, saving for culinary school. Because that's what we do. We rise and we lift others with us. The standing ovation felt like a homecoming. After my speech, a familiar figure waited by the stage. Brandon, looking genuinely humbled for perhaps the first time in his life. That was powerful, he said. Elliot sent me the link, told me I should see what I missed out on. How is he? I asked. Elliot had been meeting Brandon monthly for lunch. His choice, not mine. Forgiveness, he'd told me, was about freeing himself, not absolving his father. Brilliant. Accepted early admission to Yale, full scholarship. Brandon's smile was sad but real. He's writing his admissions essay about that night at the wedding, about courage and consequences and choosing integrity over comfort. He'll do great things. He already has. Charlotte, He stopped, started again. I've been seeing a therapist. Working on understanding why I became who I became. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Just wanted you to know that what Elliot did that night saved more than just you two. It saved me from becoming completely irredeemable. He left without asking for anything. No absolution, no second chances, no dramatic reconciliation. Just an acknowledgement of truth, delivered and received. That afternoon, I met Harper at the site of our new restaurant. We'd scraped together investments, taken out loans, bet everything on a dream. The Phoenix Table would open in 3 months, a restaurant dedicated to second chances, staffed entirely by people rebuilding their lives. You know what I love about this place? Harper asked, surveying the construction chaos. It's not about proving anything to anyone. It's just about good food and good people. And good stories, I added. Everyone who works here will have one. My phone rang. Elliot, calling from St. Catharines. Mom, you're trending again. Someone uploaded your whole speech. The comments are incredible. People sharing their own Phoenix stories. Focus on your Latin exam, I laughed. Leave the viral moments to me. Already aced it. Hey, Mom, I'm proud of you. Not for the awards or the restaurant or any of that. For becoming who you really are. After we hung up, I stood in what would soon be the Phoenix Table's kitchen, imagining the meals we'd create, the lives we'd change, the stories we'd tell. 6 years ago, I'd lost everything I thought mattered. Now I understood. I'd lost everything that didn't. That evening, cleaning out my office at Gordon's restaurant with his blessing and investment in the Phoenix Table, I found Margot's letter, still unopened. On impulse, I fed it into the shredder, unread. Some words don't deserve an audience. Some apologies come too late to matter. But other words create worlds. Like "Yes, Chef," from a teenager who'd aged out of foster care, finding purpose in a kitchen. Like "I believe in you," from investors who saw more than profit in our mission. Like "That's my mom," from a son who'd grown into a man I was proud to know. The Phoenix Table opened 3 months later to lines around the block. Critics called it Austin's most important restaurant, not just for the food, but for the philosophy. We donated every penny of opening night to culinary scholarships for single parents. Brandon sent flowers, simple white roses with a card. Congratulations on becoming who you were meant to be. I kept the card. Not for him, but for me. Proof that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just living well, lifting others, and letting your light shine so bright that the darkness has no choice but to retreat. My name is Charlotte King. I'm a chef, a mother, a survivor, and a thriver. And my story, it's just getting started.